Sit by myself, talking to the moon.
It's like, yo, host that flow Montana.
Hi guys, so I'm going to try to explain my opinion of my theory of my life. It's very complex. I'm still in hospital. It's been about 3 weeks now that I've been in hospital because of trauma, suicidal thoughts, mostly due to the relationship status that I had been in. When I was 15, I did do a suicide attempt. I survived. It was a massive overdose of over 500 pills in my system. I drank a case of beer and I took it down with pure Crown Royal. That being said, I got into my parents both had, my dad was a heavy drinker, stepdad. My mom heavy into VLT gambling machines, which made my life very difficult. Both cases, and both heavy smokers. There was a lot of financial strain, a lot of problems on our family, a lot of domestic violence and things like that in our home. I had to live through a lot and overcome a lot. And my parents were not properly supported in their addictions, resulting in a lot of adulthood trauma for myself. Later on, I got on my own, did really well, got into a relationship. Wasn't a good good relationship at all. And eventually, when I was going to be leaving him, I found out I was pregnant, and I think it was like 9 or 10 days or 6 days or something before my birthday, just close to my birthday. So then from there, I stayed with baby daddy, right? And I had to go work in a small town for a little bit to make an income because we weren't making enough income, and try to save money for this baby coming on the way. And during that time, he had been cheating on me, fully admitted by his brother, himself, my best friend, with another woman, apparently helping her out with her baby and giving her money for her milk and supplies and whatever she needed, and taking her out and all that stuff. He told me in details. Oh, he's like, oh, I just put my hand on her knee and during the movies and dinner and stuff. And, okay, but anyway, everybody was full out admitting that he fully cheated on me. So that was my experience with my first child, being pregnant with my first child, and my relationship. And later on, things started going south. Eventually, there was just a lot in our relationship that was red flags. Things I had to go through, and I eventually left the relationship. And during that time when I left the relationship, I had to live with threats of, even his own father came to my house and said, no one ever leaves us. And I had said, I did because I had to. He was abusive. His own father was abusive to his wife. From what I understand by talking to, I worked in a restaurant, and a lot of people were warning me that his dad was really aggressive to his wife, and she had tried to leave many times but couldn't, and then stayed with him. And then I think back on the threat that he made, that nobody ever leaves them. Then we go back to his son that I was dating, who basically used to threaten me by saying he would financially hurt me, and that I would be begging to crawl back to him. This is a very long dynamic story. There was a lot of threats, a lot of things going on in between, and then you think you leave this relationship, everything is done and whatnot. But then you meet this man. So a lot of these things started in 2003, 2004. Then I meet this man in 2007. stayed single. I worked hard. I had owned my own home. I had 2 vehicles at one point that were paid off. And I worked hard. I worked 2 to 3 jobs on all of these things. So let's bring ourselves to baby daddy now. And that's the ex that I was currently with. I truly do not believe that he had true intentions from the start. Let's start this. So all of a sudden one day, this man, Hugo, comes to my home on my birthday, as my best friend was doing a little birthday thing for me, and Hugo comes walking in, and he's Prince Charming, and we connected right away. Like, I don't know, I just saw his eyes, we connected, but something felt a little bit off. But I just shrugged it off like, oh, this guy's going through some hardships. He's telling me, has some issues with his ex apparently he was summy with this woman or whatever or not, and they have 3 kids together. And that should be a red flag right there. And it was for me, kind of. It was like, well, you've got a child there in Quebec, you're here working, and you're coming for me on my birthday. And so anyways, we did start dating, and then eventually I was telling him, no, I don't want this relationship. And I went to my sister's, which is like 2 towns away, and he tracked me down at my sister's, and he was like, no, I really like you, we can make this work, and don't worry about it, let's just see what happens. And I thought, oh, okay, this is a great guy. And then I started thinking, well, he didn't even know where my sister lived, but small town, everybody can tell everybody, right? And anyways, there were times we're on and off on the relationship, and eventually he left. He went back to Quebec, and I don't know, about a month later or so, he comes back, and I find this hat on my door, and I thought, oh, that's really sweet. I come off from a hard day at work, and his hat's there. And I used to call him Mr. Titan because he wore the Titan hat. He seemed like this great guy at first, and then just things eventually over time. I ended up being pregnant with my second child, really sick. I was in hospital for 4 days, and then eventually he was going to stay, and I told him around Christmas time. So I was pregnant around May, June, and I told him to go back to Quebec to his kids and, see if this is what he truly wanted. And so I was December, and I was due in February. So I started getting sick. I was sweating, and I was clammy, and I was just not feeling well. And turned out he went back to Quebec, but never even gave me a phone call to see how I'm doing or how the baby's doing or help me with any needs of the baby. And she was born. For the first 7 months, he never met her. So from December to September, he didn't meet this child until he met this child. Let's go into the in-between. Never called me, never tried to see how I was doing, never tried to see how the baby's doing. So I started doing everything on my own. I started realizing that she had weakness. So I brought her in, got an opinion from the doctor. He said, oh, she's fine, and, she's moving, and she's. So I went and I got a second opinion because my sister was like, well, if you're so paranoid, go get a second opinion. So I did. And all of a sudden he's like, you don't need a specialist right now. You need to go to the children's hospital. And I was like, okay. So then I got booked in, and it was May 22nd, 2008. When we brought her in. I'm going to pause for a minute. So my daughter was diagnosed, so I brought her in May 22nd, 2008, my oldest daughter. She was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy type 1, which is a terminal diagnosis at the time. It's considered the number 1 genetic killer in infants during the time. No treatment. And there's no cures for it at the time. It was pretty heavy, so I dealt with that. I started advocating for her rights of life. People were telling me there was things I could do. So I began to be proactive, and I was doing it on my own. I wasn't asking for help. I was just doing what I could to advocate for her rights of life. Things were very complex for me from the hospital's point of things. It was very difficult to get anything that she needed, to advocate for her, things like that. And her father wasn't on the birth certificate, so it was just me as the guardian or the parent. And I couldn't get a BiPAP for her. They were focusing on that I'm just crazy and things like that, and writing down things. We don't understand why mom's mad, and drove 5 hours down for a BiPAP mask for her at the time when it was needed, and because we had been discharged with a feeding tube and a suctioning machine. And it was a struggle to get what she needed. They were telling me, pay attention to these signs, and once you do, then we'll start putting her on BiPAP and giving her some breathing support and stuff like that. So when it came to that time, it was a fight. All of a sudden, the hospital's focusing on my mental health. Then eventually, I'm sitting there scrapbooking beside my daughter, and a social worker and security guard show up, and I get locked up. And they eventually started talking to her dad, and he's talking to me. And in between all this time, my account gets cleaned out to the Dargenet in Quebec, is where the scam happened. It got tracked down to where the money had been taken to. Mind you, her father lives in Quebec, and the only people who had access to my card was her father and my sister. So that being said, we move forward. So eventually we're coming in close to September. We're in August now. I think it was August, September. So yeah, it was about August when things started happening. I get locked up, and Hugo, her father, was calling me because he's saying that they had already separated, him and his ex, and they were separated for a month or a couple months, and that he went to a party, his ex was having a party. They have 3 kids, right, at this time. 2, 4, and 6 were their ages. And said his ex was having this party, and their son, and this is where I would like to, so there was this party, apparently, that his ex apparently was having. Now get all this. So at this party, something happened where his son was grabbed and held at knife point, so his 4-year-old at this time. Then apparently he beat up 2 guys. One of them ended up in hospital with broken ribs, and charges were pending. So he had a choice to go do time or to go to an aggressor program for 2 months. He had made me aware of this, so that would have been July, August, and then September convinces me that he's coming down on the bus, but he needs help to pay for his bus ticket. So I paid for his bus ticket to come down to come meet his terminally ill daughter in case they never got to meet, and for that moment for them and whatnot. Little did I know that was going to be the start of my nightmare. Focusing on my child completely, her well-being, her life. Plus I have another child I was trying to focus on, trying to absorb all this on my own. So this man goes there, but there's never been a conclusion as to what caused this problem, to why his son was held to a knife point at this point in the party. What caused the fight? I've never questioned it enough. And all of a sudden this man decides he's going to come down now and come see his child and me and start a life with us again. Well, we did. And so we were living at the hospital for about another 7 months because we were looking for a place in between, because I had to move from up north where I had my own home. Now remember, my other ex had told me he was going to ruin me financially to the point I would come begging back to him. All of a sudden this man steps into my life. Great man all of a sudden, but then gets into a fight because his son gets held at a knife point, breaks guy's ribs, ends up in jail. But I don't really know the whole story of that, really. Then we move into a house, but we were living off before that. When we were in the hospital, living off all my credit cards. I had excellent credit, over $21,000 in good credit My credit cards were paid off. He convinced me we're going to live off of those, plus my maternity, until he gets a job, until we get to a place. And we did. And maxed out my credit cards, promised me he'd help me pay them back, and everything would be okay. When we got into the house, he said, no, they're going into collections. I'm not paying a damn cent back. And it was kind of a red flag for me at that moment. And I started looking around him in this home, but we work really well together medically. And realizing he was a really great asset for my daughter's life medically. At that point, it was very difficult for him to help me with applications or things she needed. I had a difficult time most of the time because of his income tax, not wanting to cooperate with signing papers, things like that for what she needed. And then I started putting things together. Perhaps the reason why I had so many problems at the hospital was because of him. I don't think, in my own honest opinion, that he came, obviously, just the red flags I'm already talking about were signs that he wasn't trustworthy. Those are massive red flags. Well, eventually, it came down to I got pregnant with it. He was saying we should try for another one, and and there's a chance, and it's okay if we have the other one, and blah blah blah. So we did. The other one turned out SMA free, but during the time I was pregnant with this one, his ex was freaking out and wishing death upon my son. My son did die on Father's Day 2010 from a viral pneumonia that attacked his heart. He was sick, and I kept bringing him in, and they were saying I was paranoid and a hypochondriac, and his dad brought him in, and then came back home, and I was like, no, he needs to go to the hospital. He needs to be admitted. He's sick. Something's wrong. And his dad wouldn't listen to me and started telling me people are going to lock me up. I'm insane. I'm crazy. Stuff like that. And our son Caleb passed away on Father's Day from a viral pneumonia that attacked his heart. So I saw all the symptoms. But anyways, his ex wished death upon my son, on top of demanding that this bitch has to give her money, pardon the language, but all this stuff. And we were struggling with finances during the time due to him working, not working, holding a job down for 2 weeks and then not working and not making enough money. And he was our only income, and he was like, you know what, I want you to stay home, take care of the kids, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to help you take care of everything else. And my mom is a lot to deal with, so we're going to throw my mom into this. She is a lot to deal with. She has gambling addictions, which made it difficult on my relationship. During this time process, he convinced me, I had already sold my car before I met him, just before I met him, and he convinced me to sell my truck so that we can help pay for his ex's rent and the kids' foods and clothing and all that stuff, and because he needed to pay child support and send his money. And so I did. I helped that out. I sold my truck, and I did. Going through the rest of my story, eventually said, you know what, let's try for one more child. And he says, I truly believe we'll have a healthy baby girl. And we did. And and you think you're going to pick up from life from there. You're thinking all the red flags. Like I was doing It Works, and I was starting to do really good. His ex calls, complains about it, so I have to drop it because he's siding with his ex at this time. Red flag. So I went to paralegal. I started going there. Started getting kicked out of class because he kept phoning on my phone, wouldn't leave me alone during my class. My class started advocating for me to stay into school. So I took an opportunity, but then my hands were starting to get I couldn't type and things very stiff, and the symptoms of thyroid cancer progressing. And I had nodules before. So at this point, there was symptoms that, yes, my nodules are back and my cancer's there. And things started happening in between my son, and I had to go for carpal tunnel surgeries and stuff like that. And I started having to help my son through a lot of things that he was going through as well on top of it. So I started crashing. I started losing all that. I did 6 months of a cram course of 15 months of paralegal. And so I only got the 6 months in, and a $21,000 debt, and didn't get to finish my education. But I have to pay the debt back. I still owe $8,000, just over $8,000. There was no support from Hugo at all for me to try to focus or study or get through my courses, which gave me the other signal that there was no true intention of him. It was just the reassurance to know that he was really wanting me to drown somewhere. But sometimes I kept believing him. He also was drinking at the time and smoking heavy, and he never smoked before, but all of a sudden smoked and began smoking heavy. He was aggressive, verbally abusive. What they do is they groom you. It's called grooming. So they start grooming you. You groom them to feel like you need them and whatnot. Started grooming me and started distancing everybody else around me, and slowly I was ending up with nobody around me, no friends, nobody to talk to. Just me and my kids by myself in this home, taking care of them. And if you can go on the news, I would say to type it in. You could put my name, Lisa Lohin, Lohin, and take a look on Google search that I've had to advocate for her education, her rights for oxygen, those kinds of things. And I went on the news over that. Her father was never there behind my back to advocate or anything like that for my oldest. A lot of things that I needed to try to get for her were always a struggle. My CPP denied, just things constantly happening that should have helped our family, that never were able to help my family. Things just kept going downhill. We moved into this house after my dad had passed away in my hands. I was doing his care and stuff, and so then eventually my mom gave us a little bit of money to help with the down payment, and we got this house, and trying to rush and rationalize and think about, where we're going to go. We've got this 3-month notice now after living in the home for 7 years, and because the son needed it for college and stuff like that. And it was turmoil. Nothing was normal in my life. I couldn't have anybody in the home because of his temperament and my embarrassment over it. He's constantly like, oh, you and your mom did damages, because he uses my mom's addictions and my mental health against me, especially over the past 3 years since my brain bleed, because it's an excuse for him and his actions in all reality. But the red flags have always been there. He's humiliated my son since he was young. Triggers, finds out all my traumas. So this is the other thing. Taking all my traumas, learning about everything about my traumas and about me and my bigger things, and then started using those against me. Started attacking me deliberately with my traumas, especially my suicide, my past suicide. And started becoming physically aggressive, intimidating, demanding, screaming in my face like a drill sergeant, pressing his head against my head all the time. Doing it to my mom. My mom moved out. She got her own apartment eventually, and she was doing good, and he convinced her, and I kept telling him, no, I don't want her back in here, and he kept convincing her to come move back in, and she did. And he trashed everything in our home. Everything is destroyed. Trashed it all. And was talking to his other first relationship of 9 years, because he kept saying that he needed someone to talk to instead of going to marriage counseling or going to financial therapy or any of the options or opportunities that we've had to work together. He's gone completely against it, and he doesn't touch anything. He gets everybody to do everything for him. So he'll demand everybody, and he'll intimidate everybody and threaten people to do things for him. And you do them because he guilts you, he manipulates you, he grooms you, and he's doing it to my sister now. She's his secretary, and she's following for every demand that he makes, and he demands everybody to do things. And he was like that with me. So he doesn't touch anything. He says he doesn't know anything about technology, but he's clicked his phone to my phone and linked them, and I was able to prove it when I went into hospital July 1st. And I went on, my mom was involved with online scammers, but there's some things behind that. So anyways, I went to one of them, Paula Camera. You can see he's an online scammer. and started messaging him. And while I was in hospital, because I just got into my room and I had a suspicious feeling he was knowing everything that I was doing ahead of time, because I could never get out of the house, because he always seemed to know what I was doing, or was always 10 steps ahead of me, and all of a sudden not working no more. And then we're isolated in the home, and he has no job, but he has to pay child support and gets a lien against my daughter's disability van. So I have to pay his ex's rent because she needs that, but he will not get the lien off my daughter's disability van for the child support, and tells everybody I'm yelling at him about the child support. Well, when you don't work and you don't have an income, and you have 3 months of work, and then all of a sudden you have no income coming in, and we have all these bills and medical bills and things coming in, yeah, it's frustrating. And we never get to see the kids. Our kids never get to be a part of our children's lives. Everything is quiet, everything is secret, everything is deceiving. The man has fully admitted online that to his oldest daughter that you never have emotions for your enemy. So I guess I'm his enemy. Then I have another ex who comes online, and there's a lot of stories behind his relations of his cousins and who they all are, and some of his cousins didn't like me very much and have history of a lot of things, of violence and stuff. So anyways, some things happened, and I defended myself, and then through that, all of a sudden my life started just going rough, chaotic. I had to keep to myself, all those things. And all of a sudden, just recently, Ronald LeClaire, the one ex, decides he's going to go online, start telling me that Hugo has caused him and my son's dad damages, and started saying that his dad was the boss. His dad was retired, but lived next door to Hugo, and it was his dad who was the boss, and talking about decapitations and drownings and how many have I seen, and do I know who the boss is, and on and on and on. And what kind of decisions I'll make, because there'll be hard ones. Threats, basically. So now we have Ron, who's confirming that Hugo has caused him and Smithdorf damages, and then now I've got this man in my life of 16 years who's deceived me. If you look on his Facebook, he puts the Punisher on. The clip from the Punisher, where it says, I had a wife and I had a family, and then it shows him being destructive in the hospital, that he blows up a hospital. All these things that just add up to the fact and realization that I've just been a target for him for some reason and nothing else, out of destruction, and that he ripped up a hospital, which tells me that's why I had so many problems at the hospital, was because of him. That it's probably the reason why many of them have their hands tied. Then I'm sitting there, and I had told him a story about a friend of mine in the past who had confided in me about her dad's aggressions, being sold to her uncle for sex trafficking, things I didn't know how to deal with at that time in my life and that age. And she played this song called Oh Daddy by Fleetwood Mac to him. And eventually he broke down crying. I seen a lot of his violence and aggression. She would clean the house from top to bottom, and his rage was awful. And one day she cleaned it, and she worked so hard, and I helped her with some things, but he took a big, huge ketchup bottle and threw it, and it was smashed all over. It sprayed all over the kitchen, and it was everywhere. He was violent. So I played the song for Hugo, Oh Daddy, over and over and over and over and over one day. And he snapped, and he stood up, and he said, you know what you told me happened to your friend? I did the exact same thing to 4 of my daughters. And he says, and now I have to pay for it. And now I have 5 people to apologize. And one of them is his ex, that he fully out admits that it's his ex and his 4 children, that 4 daughters he has to apologize for his actions of what he did. Same thing. I am going to swear on my legion's oath and on my son Caleb's soul of my oath of truth on all of this. I'm not going to have to write it down I don't feel I have to owe anybody the evidence because it's already been presented to me of the facts. This man has spit in my face. He has admitted to it. He said he would do it again. He's fractured my front 6th and 7th ribs, and claiming that I was committing suicide when I wasn't. I was actually recording him and his behavior and his actions. And he came up and grabbed my phone. It flipped in the air. I ran up the stairs. He was crushing my phone. He actually cracked the side of my top of my phone while squeezing it with his hands. I ran up the stairs. He was chasing me up the stairs. I had managed to hide my phone. He was demanding my phone and pressing his head into my head. And a fight was breaking out, and I was like trying to push him away from me and get him off of me. And I managed to get into the bedroom, and I couldn't breathe. I was panicking, and I was leaning against the dresser, and I was trying to breathe. I'm also asthmatic, and I couldn't breathe. So he grabbed me by my left arm, got me on the floor, put his knee over top of me, and telling me that I'm basically a drama queen and pathetic and things like that. And my kids were there. There was no nurse that day. And he put his left knee over top of me and started pressing on my ribs. And I kept telling him, I'm feeling popping, and I'm feeling pain, and I'm feeling snapping. You're breaking my ribs. And he's like, you're such a drama queen. And he gave another nudge to my ribs. I also have osteoporosis from radiation from cancer. Gave another nudge to my ribs, and we heard them snap. And he started looking around the room, and he saw my pink med basket, full of meds, and grabbed that. And I started grabbing his shirt, and I was like, don't you dare use this against me. And he did. He went and used it and said that I was committing suicide and wouldn't take me to the doctor or the hospital. I went finally, eventually, about a week when I could get up and go. I was supposed to get storage the very next day this happened. December 15th, 2022. And December 13th, I was viciously attacked by a dog, and so was my dogs, when he told me not to leave my room. And if I leave my room, there would be consequences, and I got viciously attacked. So did my dog on December 13th. December 15th was when my ribs got fractured, and I was supposed to get storage December 16th. So every time I tried to leave, it was hard. He kept our daughter home from school, wouldn't allow her to go to school, kept us keeping her home, using COVID as an excuse, kept us isolated. So what happened was when during my cancer, there was a small argument, and I was talking about the bills or something, and he started arguing, and he says, I'm going to make sure we're going to lose this house, and it's going to be because of you, and I'm going to make sure it's because of you. And he did this while I was sick with cancer. So that's 5 years ago. And eventually the truck got picked up, the house went into foreclosure, and then he dragged it on as long as he could, manipulating the bank, everybody. So then finally, while I was trying to pack boxes in November, before, what happened was I was trying to pack boxes, and I did smoke a joint. I went outside. I do smoke THC instead of smoking cigarettes, instead of taking opioids, because I went through cancer. I've gone through a rare brain bleed on the right side of my head that I survived. So anyways, going from there, like I said, there's so much to my story. And it's like a mixture of Caring for Maid from Netflix and a mixture of The Maid, except The Maid, she's stronger than I am in there. So I got out. He kicked me out, actually. He got the police and made a report against me and saying that I'm yelling all the time and all this stuff. And excuse me, of course, when you're traumatized to the point you are isolated in your home for 15 years, not allowed friends, family, trashing your home, using your traumas against you, attacking you with all your traumas, grooming you for you feeling like you need him, and that eventually he's the only person you can turn to. So that's all you have. Threatening to take my kids away, saying that I would be alone and pathetic, and on and on and on. And so far he's lived up to his expectations. He had children's. Anyways, I ended up in a shelter in November. I was in the street, and I was in a hotel for a while, and then I went to I finally got into a shelter, and from the shelter, he started telling me he was having a heart attack and I needed to come home, and he's having heart issues and I needed to take care of our oldest daughter. And when I showed up, he was so stoned out of his mind and dysfunctional and wasn't even functioning properly. And I stayed because of the girls, but I knew I was going to be trapped. But I thought, well, I'll figure this out from here. So I started believing him, and I started setting myself up for a place, but that place got extremely trashed to a point where it wasn't even livable. It was horrible. And I was forced to be going back and forth between my mom and the RV. I got stuck with him, constantly cleaning out my money, taking my money, the 4 dogs in there, never able to go anywhere, never able to try to move forward, never try to get a house, never try to get any housing. He got our kids taken away, both of them divided. And his other threat was, like when I asked a nurse why she would never say anything, his other threat was, what she told me is that my oldest daughter would end up in a center and she will die. And he said, see, there's no way around this. Nothing you can do about it. My daughter ended up in a center. She ended up drowning in both her lungs with a chest tube in her right lung. My oldest. None of my nurses have ever spoke up or spoke out on what they've witnessed or seen because they're too afraid. For myself, I'm coming out here with my story, and it's so spiderwebbed. He had my daughter's disability van gone, driving with no license. Couldn't get registration because there's a lien on it due to his child support. I worked hard. I worked with Children's Abilities, Children's Trust, Superstore, Muscular Dystrophy, and now radio to do fundraising to get that disability van, which he now had taken away and lost. That was my daughter's, and I worked extremely hard for it. I was trying to work hard for a lot of our needs, but he was always going against us, and I could never accomplish anything. It was very difficult. He's made it clear, obviously, that he's the Punisher.
Yeah. Are you okay?
Yeah. So they always do check-ins here. So that he's put it on his Facebook that he's very clear that he is the Punisher, and that's how he refers to himself. So obviously in the Punisher, he always puts a scene or the clip where he's like, oh, I have a wife and I have family, and then it shows like destruction, and then it shows him ripping up a hospital and destroying a hospital in these scenes, which for me is very concerning. And then the fact that he wrote to, has this Jackie Chan or some kind of martial art thing, that how you have no emotions for your enemies, telling this to his older daughter. This is, referring to me, that I'm his enemy that he's never had emotions for. Obviously out to deliberately attack me for some reason. So we go back to Ron's theory of all the damages. Yeah. So I've got all these things. So yes, I eventually RCMP. Eventually I was calling for shelters, and eventually I was taken out by ambulance. RCMP got me an ambulance and took me out by an ambulance. And I don't think people are familiar with my situation. People know what's going on, they see it. But there's nothing I can do about it because he keeps utilizing my sister, my son, everybody around me that I've ever cared about. Told me not to talk to my sister, not to trust my sister. My sister was using me, so I had a big blowout. I started just psychologically being damaged very badly to a point where I did lash out at my sister and everybody, and just started feeling like everybody was against me and nobody cared about me. And I lashed out, ruined my relationship with her, and haven't talked to her for 4 years. 3 or 4 years since my brain bleed. Shortly after, 3 months after, my son told me I was a piece of shit parent, but also told me to stay with Hugo. I don't know. It's just so complex and so confusing. And it brings me to what happened to his son and why did he get held by a knife point? And sometimes I question whether it's even his own, like child, or whether it's somebody else's, or whether there's a child that is somebody else's that got involved in all this. I don't know. And whether his ex cheated on him or what it was. But I feel like he feels like he owes me the destruction in my life. And I lost a lot of my things that were my dad's family history. There was a lot of family history, a lot of my dad's things. Everything got thrown in the dump. Things were trashed. My home was trashed. And it was so much chaos. And we could have been an amazing team. Like, there were so many opportunities for us to be successful together. But he kept going in a different direction and telling everybody, oh, I'm here protecting my suicidal wife. But he was the reason why I became more suicidal. He's the reason why I don't want to live anymore. In reality, the suffering is brutal. The mental damage, the damages to me, the damages I've witnessed, the realization of how destructive he was. With no intention, in my opinion, to be there for my family. And if that was the case, he should have just stayed away. Just never come back. I would have been doing what I needed to do on my own for my own child. Anyways, so now I have 2 little girls who are completely destroyed. My youngest told me that it's okay, Mom, that you're mentally ill, and I know it's all your fault. When I was in shelter, my nurse had called me and said, Lisa, he plans to have you condemned and take the 2 kids back to his ex, or take the 2 girls back to his ex in Quebec, or to his girlfriend in Quebec, sorry, she said, and that the things he was saying to my youngest were not normal, and she was really concerned, and I needed to come home, but I told her I couldn't come home. So anyways, the grooming and manipulation began with my youngest. So now I'm sitting in the hospital, and when I said that I want to have this situation of what Ron had brought up investigated and looked at, he started yelling at me, calling me trouble. After he's been at the hospital, got $400 from me, made me pay for supper, never comes to visit me any other time. And he ended up getting really sick. So he came to the hospital on August 3rd. I took care of him all day. Instead of going to my groups and my therapy and taking care of my mental health, I ended up taking care of him all day, of Hugo. And he was extremely sick. So he took one of the pictures that I took from the hospital, like I took of him. He was on the floor because I didn't feel this was right. He was so sick with all these symptoms, and just leaving him on the floor. Nobody's trying to maneuver this situation, and everybody's being exposed. Wow, this man is extremely sick and COVID symptoms and everything. And so I took picture of how sick he was and stuff, and I was like, he's never this sick, this never happens to him. And so I took care of him. I gave him a kiss, and I knew I was taking the risk. I have my lymph nodes removed, and really honestly, I don't even have any care anymore for my life anymore, in all honesty. And if I get sick, then so be it. And I figured, well, if I give him a kiss, then so be it. I took care of him, and so he took this picture, and he went on Facebook and took a picture that I had on my Facebook page saying, talking about mental abuse and what people go through, and he put them side by side and insinuating that it's mental abuse is why he's so sick. But there was a girl that came from Ontario who was extremely sick, plus he cleaned that house that should have been condemned. In all honesty, it was so bad. The respiratory and stuff, it was bad, and he was super sick. Then he started blaming that he's like sitting there leaving messages on my phone about how he's dying and I'm killing, like me and my mom and stuff, don't even care, and all this stuff. And I got a day pass and I went with my mom instead of going with him, and his aggressions were horrible towards me. The messages and stuff he left on my phone, no insinuation of intentions of care or thought. He's only been out to destruct my family, in my own opinion, me, destroy everything about me or around me or anything that I care about. He's going on Facebook, leaving nasty posts and lying about his actions. Nothing is truthful, and every time I've seen it, it just shows how devious and how cruel he is. He's putting my dog up and taking videos. Oh, look, I've got the Sasha bear, and just trying to be intimidating and stuff. And the man's already taken everything out of my life. He's destroyed my life. I have no home. I have nothing to go back to. I have to fight for my kids. He's been the reason why I have to fight for my children. Call children's services instead of saying, he's just going back and forth, and got my son to write a bunch of stuff, and it's been unreal. And so now I'm in hospital working on recovering myself, but at the same time, all the evidence is there, and of the cruelty, that he had no true intentions right from the start, and him saying that he owes, and he put it right online, that yes, he owes Melanie, he owes his 4 kids all these apologies, which tells me his actions were never true intent, that Ron is probably right then. His dad's the boss. I start feeling sick, and then I have to, anyway, I'm on isolation. As on top of it, our unit's COVID outbreak, or the hospital's on COVID outbreak. So, there is so much to my story that doesn't make sense, that starts making sense. So many things that I myself try to understand the actions of someone else. Anyways, the next threats that he's made is that he's going to attack me on my brain bleed and let everybody know I'm crazy since my brain bleed. But it's funny because since my brain bleed, he's been at home, hasn't been working, and I've had my bigger issues since he's been home the whole time. Sorry, I keep getting interrupted too, guys. I have meds and things that I gotta do, and so I had some symptoms and things are going on, but as I was saying, there is a lot that doesn't make sense to the situation. A lot of people say, oh, you're paranoid, you look into it too much. The fact that it's concerning of him putting the things of the Punisher and then making me listen to the song Take Me to Church, saying that that's him and that's his song, and all these things that he keeps saying to me, and the fact that Ron had mentioned all that stuff. There's so many things in between, and yes, there's lots that went wrong at the hospitals, and it is like caring for Maya situation. And like I said on Netflix, it is like that. I do agree. So myself, I was trying to justify what is the stressors caused by the situation of my daughter's illness and the hospital to the reality of all of this. There's a lot of things that are not normal, that a man normally wouldn't do to a woman, or for his kids, or for a family, and especially if he's moving on with a new relationship, which I know deep down inside it's been more sexual than spiritual. There's not been the spiritual connection. We haven't had that. I could always feel it when a man tells you that he loves you. He'll look you in the eyes and he'll be, I love you. Like, you can see it. When you say I love you and he looks away saying I love you, then it's not there. Red flags. Proposes. We start, asking to set, when do we set a wedding date, blah, 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 all that stuff. Never comes around, never happens. Always an excuse for it. The things like are unbelievable. In my past, there was, facts and stuff of a lot of things that are concerning, and it's still concerning to this day. And then to justify his actions of abuse doesn't stand with me. When you love someone, you won't spit on them. You don't try to hurt them. You don't make them cry. You don't take their traumas and play them against them. You don't tell them they're pathetic and nobody's going to love them and they're going to be alone and you're going to make sure of it and you're going to take their kids away. He's lived up to every expectation he has ever threatened. If you actually look on my Facebook and on all my past lives, or like the lives of my videos and stuff like that, you'll see all his threats, and that to this day, it's a reality. Everything I said he was going to do to me, he has done it. Everything that he had threatened me with has been reality. So I went through thyroid cancer. I've gone through losing their son, my dad, my biological dad, and then I survived a brain bleed that most people typically die from. And I've held my ground because I knew that this man never had true intentions for me. And I've done the best that I could, and I have nothing to my name to this day. This man wants to take every single thing away from me. I've lost everything. Anything of value, anything of importance, anything, my children, everything that I've ever loved or cared about, he made sure it's gone out of my life. He's been so destructive and very clear about his destructions. And when you look on his Facebook, you can see he's posting the Punisher scenes and Punisher, and he says he's the Punisher. I call him the last resort. And the reason why I call him the last resort is because he's the last one to show his true colors out of all of this situation. He's the one bringing to light of the destruction. He's the one that's living the prophecy of his destruction, showing no faith, no compassion. Also told me, asked me for my lawyer's phone number. Started calling my lawyer, told me my lawyer's not even going to help me. And when I read my letter from my lawyer directly, it made it clear. My lawyer had said, the judges talk. Well, if the judges talk, then you're not a good lawyer. If you're concerned and worried about that. If there's evidence against me, it is your job to work on my behalf. Then you're not a good lawyer and you're not doing your job. So obviously I fired my lawyer. Intimidation and threats have obviously gotten there too. It's unbelievable. One of my exes is Mexican. Made it very clear that he'll make me Mexican too. Sending me photos, nude photos, things like that. I've asked him to stop. Even the dad. It's been horrible. Absolutely horrible. And I literally have not seen any justification from Hugo himself to show any reality or any evidential proof. 15 years, I went to Jasper once overnight, and I went to Fort Mac once overnight. I asked if we could go fishing many times. I've asked if we could go for walks. I've asked if we could go to the gardens, if we could go to the zoo, if we could go to the Fort Edmonton Park. I mean, you name it. I've asked many times just to go out or let our family go out and enjoy life for our daughter's quality of life. What I think, in my own opinion, is I don't think he expected our oldest to live 15 years. And if I'm such a horrible, cruel mother, how is it that she's been alive? SMA type 1s, take a look around. How is it she's alive for 15 years when he's been working most of the time and I'm the one at home? been doing a lot of her care. I gave up a lot. My mom helped me with a lot. But what he's done is unforgivable at this point. You can't forgive someone who's evil like that. Not to mention my other ex, my son's dad. We have a lot of scammers that come from Nigeria. Abakudo, or I can't remember, Lagos and Port Harbor or something. Well, anyway, 3 locations. My ex's biological father originally comes from South Africa. His brother resides there. And when I start confronting a lot of Nigerian scammers online with names and things like that, they tell me my parents will die, I'm going to be dead. They get aggressive, really aggressive when I start hitting the nail on the coffin. Super aggressive with me. My mom has been robbed, set up and everything here. It's unbelievable. And there's nothing I can do about it. I could go to court, I could go fight it. You know, it's going to be all evidential, blah, blah, blah. But I will swear to my legions, and I will swear on my son's soul, the oath of my truth, that I'm living this reality. Being run off the roads, things like that. It's been unbelievable. It's been a nightmare. A man who loves you will stand by your side and help you succeed and go to group therapies and encourage you to go to group therapies and get better. A man who loves you will help you succeed. And you both will rise to the top so that everybody can be taken care of, including his ex if it had to be. I've listened to stories about, he sits there going on about how I accuse him about his uncle being a drug cartel, but he's the one that threatened if my mom ever called the cops. That is just as simple as slipping something into her coffee and that's it. It'll be done. He's constantly gone on, had discussions about how a lot of how his uncle had big crates of hash. And in Montreal, between Montreal, Quebec, or whatever, they use a lot of the underground tunnels, the old underground tunnels. And goes on about how he was on coke and speed before, and that he's had a one of the drug dealers put a gun to his head, and he put the drug dealer's head in the toilet because he didn't want to make a scene by putting the gun off in a public place. And then he's made comments about how something happened, about how the police came in and found something in a piano and some guy that he knows, and he just keeps going on about all these situations, which tells me that there's high involvement of drug cartel going on. A small town, a small community of everybody knows everybody. So everybody's got each other's back. The social worker that they have up there for his other daughter, he went to high school with. So there's so much manipulation. His aunt was a social worker. It's a small town where everybody grew up with everybody, and everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows who's the one in power. Everybody knows who's in control in these towns. And there's really not a thing you can do about it. You're a sitting goose. And you have this man who's out to destroy your life because he thinks he owes you that. My other ex, my son's dad, had gotten his lawyer to write a letter saying that he wants what he pays for and wants to restrict my freedom. Klaus Tika was my lawyer, presented it to the judge. And from there, it was a big red flag right there. Wants to restrict my freedom and wants what he pays for. And now look at me. Look at my situation. Homeless, attacking my family. And this man is great. He's admitted he's taken psychology. Like, he is like literally like army built. He's a very smart man. The one that I was with for 16 years. It just took over recently, his aggression towards me, especially when I said I would like to have this looked at because it does concern me. If he's lying, then you have no problems to go with me to justify these things that Ron's saying. But instead he called me trouble, said I'm nothing but trouble. and I'm going to see what's going to happen to me. He's going to use my brain bleed against me. And then when he saw that I guess he saw it on Facebook that I used my day pass and I went with my mom, and called me and started attacking me about my mom and me. Angry. It's a sex addict on top of it. So this man previously did coke and speed before he met me, apparently to keep up to his ex all the time, who was always, when the police showed up, he was always hitting him. Get that. His ex was always hitting him, but she calls him particular, leaving it open for discussion. Can't say he's a great dad, he was an awesome man. Particular, though. There's so much to my story that does not make sense, but does make sense. And of course, it looks like it's so chaotic. And the hospital parts of it, yes, were very difficult, but then I was starting to think, is it because of someone else? The other parent involved. So anyways, YouTube, I'm trying to explain this as best as I can because it sounds so surreal to me, even myself. But the reality of everything and all the events that took place and the reality of the destruction now, I have no reason to prove anything to anyone else. For myself, I feel like it's been justified. I feel like I've been able to see it. I knew about it. It's obviously he's proving himself on his own Facebook of his own evil ways and just how evil he is through just the Punisher movies and clips. A man on a mission, the Punisher. But the Punisher to protect who or what and why? That's the question. Never got to see or meet his children. And he says, oh, it's because you yell all the time. But not even in the beginning did I ever get to, or not even try to make a relationship between our children that, the siblings here. But the siblings there got help. I got to be part of each other's lives. But my siblings here are always excluded. Never tries to find a way for them to have a relationship. Red flags. Everything is so secretive with all his children. Everything is so secretive with everything. Yeah. But anyways, sitting in a hospital, crazy, having to prove myself as a good mother after 15 years of helping keep my daughter alive, advocating, going on the news, fighting for all her needs, right down to her education. Everything that's just been stripped away. For a man who said that he loved his suicidal wife. I don't know, YouTube, TikTok, whoever. I don't know. Anyways, the rebuilding part of my life is the hard part. The acceptance of the traumas. Accepting this man never had any good intention in the beginning, because if he did, that man would be flipping around so bad and he'd be like, you know what, I loved this woman so much. He never did. He never did from the beginning, and it's obviously clear when he put that post on his thing that you have no emotions for your enemies. So then the Punisher. So 3 years of my brain bleed was living hell. And those 3 years were the 3 years he was staying in our home every day. He worked oil and sand, so he's gone often. Always going hunting, where his ex-sister-in-law happened to move from Quebec to Hinton and lived. Worked for Alberta Health Services on top of it. Ron's sister works for Alberta Health Services. My ex's mom worked in the cafeteria of Alberta Health Services. I'm not even going to tell you what's been going on for my medical file. It's been a nightmare. And in all honesty, even if I go to court or anything that I say or anything that I do, it's not going to change anything. Man's got full control, and when you start getting involved, obviously to this extent, they just want to watch you suffer until you have no more left inside you, and I don't. I'm going on here with my own story, or my own side of it. My one question is why was his son held at knife point, and what was the fight about? Why did he break some guy's ribs, and why was that party, and why did it get to a point his son was grabbed by a knife point? And then all of a sudden he decides to come here to Alberta. Makes me pay for his bus ticket, has no money but has $700. All of a sudden just worked very quickly at the club and a few things and make it look like he's separated or what. But I wasn't born yesterday. A lot of me stayed with this man because I was trying to figure out what is his motive and motivations, and they're not normal. I never collected evidence very much. Didn't feel the need to. I don't feel the need to justify to anybody what I've been through, what my family's been through. And at the same time, I somewhat do, because I never speak up enough for myself. And I haven't spoken up for myself very much at all. I just let him keep doing what he's doing. Being destructive, living up to his threats and expectations, continuously proving his destruction of me. Single mom who lived on her own, trying to get out of a relationship and just trying to pick up her life again. But obviously there's a lot of chiefs involved, a lot of Derek hands. There's a lot of things involved in this. So I'm going to leave it about here. And it's part of my side of the story.
If I woke up without you, I don't know what I would do. I thought I could be single forever till I met you. Usually don't be falling first. You got a way of keeping me coming back to back. I just found out the only reason that you loved me was to get back at your ex-lover. But before you leave, usually I would never even care. Baby, I know she creeping, I feel it in the air. Every night and every day I try to make you stay, but your savage love did somebody break your heart. Looking like an angel, but your savage love. When you kiss me, I know you don't give to. I still want that savage love. Savage love. Savage love. You could use me. Baby, I hope that this ain't coming, 'cause I gotta run.